Yoga teachers, mindfulness leaders, and energy workers, are you ready to stop side hustling and start making an income doing what you love? Welcome to the Marketing Off the Mat podcast. Each week, your host, Jessica Cross, dives into conversations with successful creatives in wellness, business, marketing, and more to uncover practical methods to take your business from A to B and have some fun along the way. Grab some tea and pull up a seat. Let's dive into this episode.
Welcome to Marketing Off the Mat. It's Jessica, your host, and thank you for joining us today. We are talking about the 3 boons of a yoga business with my friend, Barbara Courtille. Barbara has been practicing yoga since the late 1980s, and she started practicing with the Iyengars, but she's explored various Hatha traditions that include Jivamukti, ashtanga, vinyasa, and of course, she has delved more into the yin and restorative and meditation, sound healing sides of things, which we all know and love here on this show. Barbara also mentors yoga teachers who want to make yoga their full-time profession. She's currently writing a book on yoga philosophy to help yoga teachers bring the wisdom of yoga to their students in a practical way. We can't wait for that to drop. So let's dive into this episode. Hey, Barbara, how are you?
Great, Jessica. Great to see you.
So good to see you. Thanks for being here. I'm just so glad that you took the time. This is going to be a fun chat.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Okay, so we got to hear a little bit about you in the intro, but I know there's just so much more behind the scenes that makes you you. So we want to hear a little bit about you, about your yoga journey, and then how that brought you into today.
Yeah, so I started a long time ago, and obviously yoga has changed a lot during that time. And now we're in a completely different phase. So it's exciting. And it's interesting to look back at the very beginning when I was dragged off to yoga with a boyfriend of mine who was a very dedicated practitioner. And he was also a Buddhist and did a lot of meditation. Anyway, I was an artist. My whole thing in life was to do art, and that's all I was interested in. And my first yoga class was not a great experience. It was quite intimidating, and I was shamed, and I got to experience the not so great side of, that kind of yoga. But that's, for some reason, I went back. And never in a million years would I have thought that yoga would become like my life, basically. So it's interesting, the things that we think are going to happen and the things that actually happen. And once you get into it, it just becomes your life. And it's a little bit, when I talk to new yoga teachers, it's really exciting because it reminds me of that time when it's like falling in love. It's like, oh, they're in love. Or sometimes it's lust. Sometimes they're in lust and it fades out. Because, it's difficult. Like any relationship, it's difficult and it takes work. And sometimes they fall in love and then it becomes a lifelong practice, like it has for me. So it's always really nice to see people's journey and how it develops. And it's different for everyone. There's not a generic recipe.
I love that. I also love that you were generous enough to share with us that your very first class wasn't that lust or love experience that we so often hear about.
No, it was terrible. I was shamed and I was made to feel really small. I mean, it taught me how not to teach yoga, put it that way.
Absolutely. What a lesson.
Yeah, and we learn from people that don't do things right, just like we learn from mistakes. It's exactly the same. So I'm grateful to that yoga teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm grateful that you went back.
Yeah. I can't imagine, especially with that whole COVID thing that we've had, and I've had my own personal tragedies in the last few years, I can't imagine how I would have coped without my practice. Like, seriously, I don't know how people cope with life. I really don't.
I am with you. I 100% agree. And I'm just so glad that there's people like you practicing and teaching and continuing to share the message, because I think that's why we are all here. We know how important and vital really these practices are, especially in times like these. So
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. So you went back, you found the practice that really lit you up and has become such an important part of who you are today and has supported you through all these twists and turns. So, and you mentioned you love talking with new yoga teachers. I know you mentor yoga teachers. So tell me a little bit about that. Tell us how you kind of got started in supporting other teachers and building their businesses.
It's something that started with the pandemic, really, because that's when we all started to pivot, go online, and completely change the way that we taught yoga. And of course, a lot of people were struggling with that. But I always say, I think yoga teachers did really well in pivoting and trying new things and just going for it. And that's a really great lesson. You just go for it and you try and you get your ego out of the way and get that sense of it has to be perfect and I have to know everything before I start. And so many teachers just went for it. And it's fantastic, and it's like we've created this whole new genre, if you like, or this whole, and if I think when generations after us look back into the history of yoga, this will be a particular thing that they'll, that will pinpoint a particular time in history. So we're part of that, which is exciting, as much as it's been challenging. And also, there's grief attached to that when you have to let go of a way. I mean, especially someone from my generation, when I started yoga, it was in people's living rooms. It was it was quite, what's the word? Like, it wasn't mainstream. It was quite unique and something a little bit out of the norm and more hidden, if you like. And then it became very commercial. So there's grief with that, because you don't want your little precious little gem of a thing that you do to be bastardized.
So true.
So yeah, it's interesting, but it's great to be in that journey. And as with the new yoga teachers that I teach, I sort of wonder, where will they be like in 30 years, in 40 years, in 50 years? Because, this is a lifelong practice. And they'll look back and see their own little contribution within that huge tradition that we're all participating in. So it's great to be part of that.
Yeah, it's actually, I love the way you put that. It's really exciting. I think, sometimes we get kind of in the weeds and we can't see that bigger picture of we are, we joke about funnels. If you've listened to the podcast or you follow Barbara and I on Instagram, we kind of joke about the fundamentals of business in some ways, or it's like, we get stuck in the funnel, we're in the Instagram slog, we're marketing our butts off, telling everybody how to get the yoga from us. And we don't always see this like wider lens of how much historically has happened in this practice in our time alone. It's kind of incredible. And we get to be a part of it.
Yeah.
It's just really, really neat.
Yeah, and I think there's also that tendency to be a little bit sentimental about how things were, and sometimes we don't appreciate the good things about, because it's not, there's always both sides to a coin.
That's so true. Yes, I think there's a bit of grief, a little mourning. Even from my own teaching practice, I lost some studio jobs in the pandemic. I know many of us listening, and maybe even you too, Barbara, kind of experienced a loss in many ways, through this, but also too, I'm not sure that you and I would be speaking if it weren't for the pandemic. I don't know that this podcast would exist if it weren't for the pandemic. So
yeah, absolutely. Podcasts have been a great thing that's come out of the pandemic. And also, Instagram, as much as we bag it out. I mean, I've met so many cool people through Instagrams, people that are like I'm friends with.
Yeah, me too.
And before we were so much into social media, it was teaching yoga was even more isolating. So it's a really nice way to connect for sure. So we need to, appreciate the good things.
Yeah, it's two sides of the coin, as you said. It goes hand in hand for sure, and it's easy to forget, when we're kind of in the thick of things, just how much good we actually have at our fingertips as teachers.
And how lucky we are to be able to practice and teach this wonderful philosophy and tradition. Like it's an honor, it's a privilege.
It is a privilege, absolutely, to have the time and the resources and and everything that it takes just to, step on your own mat or step up at the front of the room, however that works out for you. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
Sure. So, one of the things we were talking about today, which I'm just super excited to get into with you, to kind of dive in, is, we're talking about the boons of a yoga business, or 3 boons that are required for a successful yoga business, which is just, I'm like, oh, please tell us more, Barbara. I'm so excited. So I think, if you've gone through a YTT, you've studied yoga philosophy, and even minimally, you've probably heard the word boon used. And, for our conversation, I just kind of want to set the foundation for us and for everybody who's listening. Can you just give us a quick definition of what a boon is in general terms?
Sure. So first, I have to admit that little title is a hook.
We love a good hook.
It's a hook. I mean, I wish there were just 3 things that you needed to do to be a successful, to have a successful yoga career. But it's just a cute little hook. And I like to use words that go back to the tradition and to the philosophy of yoga. So the 3 boons that I know, that I think of, is that from the Hatha Upanishads. So it's a story in the Upanishads about Nikachita, who is kind of like a new yoga teacher. He's young, but he has a lot of wisdom in his heart. And he's banished to go and see the king of death, Yama, by his father. And then when he goes to the king of death, Yama's not there. And that's a big no-no in that tradition at that time. You always have to greet your guests, especially if they're Brahmins, and, you feed them and you give them order. So when the king of death returns 3 days later, he's horrified that he hasn't been here to greet the guest. So he gives him 3 boons as a kind of a gesture, as a, please forgive me, I'll give you 3 boons, whatever you like, whatever you want, just ask me. So that's where it starts. And Nachiketa asks for peace with his father because he's had a fight with his father. That's how he's ended there. So that's the first thing. So when I think about that, I think that idea of having a community that is peaceful and harmonious. So to me, I translate that in terms of building a yoga career is your community, having your own little community that's in harmony with what you stand for and what you're into. So that's the first boon. The second boon he asks for is a teaching about a fire ceremony, which gets you to the celestial realms. So a lot of yogis don't want to come back to this world, right? They want to leave the samskara wheel. They want to end up liberated so that we no longer have to suffer. So it's yoga is essentially about releasing ourselves from suffering. So Yama teaches him this ceremony, which comes from the Vedas. So the Vedas are all about rituals and ceremonies to get things, So he teaches him that, and then he's so good at performing that. He's so, he puts a lot of confidence. He's quite confident for a young man, and he learns this ritual, and he's given that boon. So that, to me, relates to confidence. So the second aspect of what I teach is this idea of building confidence, and building confidence comes from practice, because yoga is a practice. So you can't get around the fact that you need to practice. Sure. No matter how much you read or whatever, you just need to do the thing, and do the thing before you're ready to do the thing. Don't wait for everything. Don't wait for all your ducks to be lined up, because then you'll never do the thing. So that takes courage, and I like the analogy of fire, because it's the fire burning within, the passion. So you need that certain amount of passion, and a lot of yoga teachers have it, because if you don't have it, you don't get very far.
That's true.
And and then the third boon, which is the big one, it's always in these stories, it's always the third ones that's the, ta-da, what have we got now? And he asks for the secret of death, therefore the secret of life. What's it all about? What's the Atman? Where does the soul go? Do we come back? All the big questions, which is what yoga philosophy tries to delve into. Like, isn't that the big questions of life, right? Why are we here? Why are we doing this thing? What's my dharma? What's my purpose? All these things come from this little question of his. And so Yum is very reluctant to answer this question because it's huge. He's asked him a huge thing. And so he tests him. He says, look, I don't really want to answer that. I don't know if you're ready for that, but I'll give you all this. I'll give you the elephants and all the women and all the this and all. And the story goes on, and he offers him all these basic we kind of want, or we think that we want. Don't want that. What's the point of having these things when I'm going to die anyway? Everything is impermanent. Everything's going to go. So what's the point of having this pleasure? Or what's the point of having all this stuff when it's just not going to last anyway? And so that's his test. And he passes the test by refusing all of these temptations. So that's the third aspect, I think, is commitment. The commitment. You need to be really committed to the path, because otherwise it's very easy to get distracted and to give up. Why? Because there are lots of other things that you can do in this world which are a lot easier than being a yoga teacher.
Ain't that the truth?
So I love this particular Upanishads because I think it's really, it's inspirational, and it's a way to remember the why, the big why.
I love the way that you've related this back to teaching and having a teaching practice and a yoga business, because it's so relatable. And I think, we could all take something from this and use it towards our business, towards daily life, which is, why these yogic texts have lasted as long as they have. It's why, obviously why we teach. There's something here for us that's very human and can help guide us. So how better than to relate that back to business. It's so good. So if you'll repeat those 3 boons for us just one more time. It's community.
Oh, community, confidence, and commitment. The 3 C's. It's another little hook.
Yeah. Barbara, you're so good. I love it. So the 3 C's are the three boons of a successful yoga business. So good. So I kind of love how you ended with the third one about the story about his temptations, the potential for him to take in all of these riches instead of getting the actual answer to, what is life? What is death? Why are we all here? How does it all go? Which is, also a very humanizing question, all the questions that we have kind of leaning underneath. So, how do we, here's a question I didn't ask you ahead of time, by the way. How do we avoid those temptations where, we see, something really, shiny that's outside of the yoga world, where it's like, God, it would be just so much easier if I would drop all of this yoga stuff and go take my corporate job back, or how it would be so much easier if I, didn't have to teach that 6:30 a.m. class and I just give it all up. Like, how do we stay true to ourselves and to the person that signed up to be at the front of the room, to be the teacher? How do we stay committed in the face of all of these different things that can be really distracting?
Yeah, it is very distracting, but these are the tests. And look, it's all in the heart. It's all in meditation and in the heart. You need to really meditate on your heart space. That's where the Atman is. That's where your soul lives. And you need to, and that doesn't mean that people shouldn't go and have corporate jobs. Like often I say to people, the teachers that I work with, keep your job and just build slowly. You don't have to chuck in your job. It's not about that. It's not like you're going to get some big medal because you've done that, because sometimes that's not appropriate. Like sometimes, there's real financial commitments that you need to be, sensible about. So it's not that I'm saying that people that aren't teaching full-time or whatever, there's something wrong with them. Not at all. You have to follow your heart, and at the same time follow the dharma of society. So there's the personal dharma and there's the societal dharma, and the people who you're responsible for if you've got children or whatever it might be. So it's a balancing act, and it's not going to be the same for everyone. But at the end of the day, you've got to listen to your heart.
Yeah, that's so good.
you need to really have a meditation practice for that, or whatever meditation is for you.
Yes. Yeah, that's so powerful. And it isn't just, something that we do every single day, but that meditation or the meditative practice, whatever it looks like, is the thing. As we at the top of the show said, we can't avoid our practice. We got to be practicing. So this is the thing that we lean into that's going to help us decipher, really, what our heart is desiring and which way that we have to go to be in alignment with the societal dharma that you mentioned.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's the yoga practice that gives you that ability to discern.
Yeah.
That's why we do it. I mean, we get wiser. We get wiser with time and practice. So the longer you do it, the more consistent you are, the more you will know within yourself. So it's not about me or anyone else telling you. You need to listen to the self.
Yeah. And that's exactly what you said. It's exactly what we're cultivating with our practice, is the awareness and the ability to get quiet and, aside from all the distractions, really listen to what it is that our heart is asking for. And that's, no one else can tell us how to get there. It's only within each of us that we have to listen. It's so good. Yeah, it's so good. I just could talk about philosophy and yoga and business all day long. This is just so much fun.
I know, right?
So if you could go back at any point in your previous career or in any previous version of yourself and just whisper a little something in your ear that would save you a few sleepless nights or maybe a headache or two, what would it be?
I've made so many mistakes, Jessica. It's not even funny. Every mistake is a lesson, just like that horrible teacher that I had. You learn from, that's just what we do. We learn from our mistakes. However, I think, just like I was saying, don't wait to do something. If you get that spark, don't wait, just do it. It's also the same in reverse, to listen to your intuition. There's things that I've hung on to far too long. And even though I knew that time was up. So it's kind of like the reverse of that. But it all comes back to exactly what I said, listening within, trusting your higher self. And you need to be able to discern what that voice is within, because we have so much wisdom in the wisdom body. We need to dig deeper. We go through the koshas until we get there. And that's where you need to land. So that's why meditation is really important. You need to find that quiet and listen. And in order to listen, everything needs to be very quiet.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. So you're saying if we just meditate, it's practice and all is coming, right?
I think it's the most powerful practice we have at our fingertips. It took me a long time to be able to meditate. Like, I was practicing yoga probably for about 20 years and I couldn't even chill out in Shavasana. I'd be lying there in Shavasana. I'd be going, okay, what am I doing next? This planning. And the biggest planner. I'm a very organized person. So my mind loves to plan. My mind loves those lists, and it took me so many years. And then one day just came to me like this. One day just dropped, and then I was like, oh, this is what everyone's talking about. I had my little samadhi moment, very brief, but it was so powerful, because once you get that, there's so much relief. All that stress, all that anxiety, all that worry, everything just lifts, and you just see things so clearly. And that's when you can really trust yourself and trust the universe by listening. So once I had that experience, I was just hooked. That's it. I'd meditate religiously every day. I just need to cope with life.
Yeah, a lot of coping to do too. I can so agree with that. And thank you for being, just sharing kind of behind the lens that you practiced for 20 years before you were able to meditate. So it's not always an overnight thing, and it's not always calm and peaceful on the inside, even as teachers.
Yeah, it's a strange thing. It comes to you maybe when you need it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love too, I think we mentioned a little bit in your intro too, is you kind of started with those more like movement practices, a little bit, more intense with your practice. And then you kind of have moved more into the yin and the restorative, which I think sometimes people think those practices are easier because you're not, doing 15 vinyasas or whatever it is as a part of that practice. But I actually think there's so much more difficult to sit with yourself in those poses for so long.
Yeah, those practices are very powerful. I've just noticed, especially yin yoga, like my body just craves it because it really rejuvenates you on so many deeper levels, emotionally, mentally. When I'm feeling really exhausted, I can just sit with legs up the wall or something, even for 5 minutes, or if there's a heat wave or whatever. And it's just amazing how it shifts everything. And all you're doing is just lying there, breathing, listening to your breath. It's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's not to say that, strong practice tappers is really important as well, because we want to create space in the body. So it's all of it is great.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of about finding and picking little pieces and parts for the different practices. And that changes also with the seasons around us and also the seasons in our own lives too, what we really need.
Yeah, absolutely. It changes day to day, depending on how you've slept, how hydrated or dehydrated you might be. That's why meditation is actually the most powerful thing to do first. So you just sink in. What do I need today? And I do that at the beginning of all my classes if I'm teaching people. Just what do you need? And then create that intention, sankalpa. That's really powerful too. So that you're not doing the same thing every day, or your intention's not the same every day.
Yeah, that's really good and really great tips too for being at the front of the room too, dropping in first before you start teaching. I love that. That's really good. Okay, so how can we find you if we want to hang out with you a little bit more outside of this podcast?
So my website is simply my name, Barbara, Barbara, Courtille, Courtille, all just in one word.com. So if you go to my website, it's got all the other links to all the other things.
Easy enough. Okay, well, perfect.
Easy. It's very easy.
Good. Well, we'll be sure to put a link to your website in the show notes too. And I know you're working on a really exciting book coming up pretty soon. So hoping that maybe we can follow along on Instagram or all the platforms to see how that's going. And you'll let us know. So maybe we can come back on the show and we can hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I've just started writing it, so I have no idea how long it's going to take, but it's a challenge for me. We all need to challenge ourselves. I'm not a writer. I love writing. I love writing blogs and posts and so forth, but I've never written a whole book. And to me, people that write books, I sort of look up to them. And I thought, just do it. It's like what I was saying before. Just have a go. I mean, what's the worst that can happen?
Right.
So I'll be sharing little snippets of that in my newsletter. So if you want to join my newsletter, I send a blog every week. I try not to make it too long. I try to make it as interesting as possible. And I think I'll be sort of like putting little bits of what I'm going to be writing about, which is based on yoga philosophy. But I want it to be very practical. I'm a very grounded and practical person. I'm not an academic. I'm not sort of looking at these tests for the sake of it or for arguing points or anything like that. It's just, how can we take these teachings and are they applicable to us in this day and age? And if so, how can we use them? And how can we translate that to our students? Because that's what we're here for as teachers. It's not, we have our own practice, but we need to share.
Yeah. And that's incredible. I'm so glad that you are doing this and that you finally said, why not? Why not me? Let me be this author that I look up to. It's so awesome. We can't wait to hear more about the book.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll be speaking to you about it one day.
Let's just call it in. I think it's going to happen. So, well, thank you again for being on. It was so awesome to chat with you today.
You too. And thanks for the work that you do, Jessica. I'm loving your podcast. I've really enjoyed following you on Instagram as well. And you've got such nice energy. So thank you.
Thank you. That's so kind. Such a great connection. So glad. Oh, I'm so grateful for that chat with Barbara. I really enjoyed learning from her incredible wisdom and experience in the yoga industry. And we're just so grateful that she took the time and shared so deeply from the philosophical side of yoga and how that really marries beautifully with the yoga business. So definitely go give her a follow on Instagram. She's at Barbara_Courtille. That's COURTILLE_yoga. You can find her over there, and we'll include links to her website as well. And I think we should have Barbara back on when that book launches. What do you think? So let me know what you thought of this episode on Instagram. You can DM me. It's at jessicacross.co. I'd love to know your thoughts and maybe what you'd like to see in future episodes. Until then, I hope that you keep showing up for your business in such a true and clear way, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Off the Mat podcast, and give yourself some gratitude for taking action in your wellness business journey. Please share this episode with someone you know who could use a fresh dose of inspiration. And we'd be thrilled if you would rate, review, and subscribe to Marketing Off the Mat on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Want to share an idea with Jessica? DM her at jessicacross.co on Instagram to continue the conversation or find out how she can help you take the next right step in your business. Until next time, stay inspired and keep showing up.